Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It is your favorite Dark Sorcerer here, Angelus, son of Abaddon. And tonight, I'd like to discuss with you a little bit about legal versus religion. We know that in the Witch's Creed, the Witch's Pyramid, or the Witch's Oath, as they're all the same thing, one of the main creeds is to remain silent. Ask yourself this: why? Why is it important to remain silent? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you so, and I will tell you why. Hello, Judy. I spent the better part of the day reading and studying not only the legal system, but also that of religious rights and laws, specifically what classifies a crime surrounding religion. Now, we're all aware of the JCI and how so many of these pastors and bishops have been convicted of sexual misconduct or some form of criminal activity. So I'm not going to get into that. The point is they get away with murder, right? Why? Because they have the money to do so, to be influential. They have their deity in their corner. Well, guess what? So do you. You have all these gods, all these demons, all these angelics, the Loa, the Ugan, the Jinn that you can work with. But how can you utilize this within a legal means? Well, first of all, in the United States, sorry, my mustache is rubbing up against my nose, and it's like, but my point is this: you want to look at your religion. What does it entail? Okay, what items or ritual items do you need and utilize? Okay, most importantly, where do you perform rituals? Now, like I said, the witch's creed, the witch's pyramid, the witch's oath: to know, to dare, to will, to keep silent, and to go forth, right? Notice I said to keep silent. This is why. Let's say, for an example, you're into Palo Mayumbi or you're into Voodoo, okay? Maybe Rugeria or Quimbanda, maybe Santa Morte, Satanism, or even necromancy. Yes, that's right, necromancy, the darkest and most feared religious practices ever to be recorded by the JCI, the Judo Christian institutions, as being the number one classified dark arts associated within the seven forbidden arts, the seven forbidden practices. And number one, two, based on the definition and classification of what witchcraft is. Okay? Now let's take a look at this for an example. You can have your altar and your ritual space indoors or outdoors. Basically, anywhere outdoors is considered the devil's playground, right? Well, let's take a look at this and think about this for just a minute. You can go to a public park. As long as you have a permit, you can conduct some form of ceremony or gathering. Do you notice how I said permit, right? Kind of like having to have a permit to go fishing or hunting, maybe even a business license where you have to even start a business, okay? Or even dropping 500 bucks down to run a small booth during the fair. Same exact thing. You have to have a business license. You have to have insurance in case all something goes airy and somebody gets hurt. Therefore, you're held accountable, okay? And you're held reliable. You're protected, right? Well, let's take this further. What if you weren't one of these white light practitioners who wants to obey the laws? What if you're a dark arts practitioner? Let's say you're into black magic. Let's say you want to become a Boko or Bokor, you know, one of the feared types. You want to, where people go to them, they sell their services just like the white light practitioners do. But yet people view them as being evil, shunning them. Maybe the Darak and Druidism, the Dark Shaman, dark shamanism, which is practiced in Nagoya or South America, Colombia, Brazil, you know, or you can go with Satanism in general, satanic practices, maybe even necromancy. Let's say, for an example, you want to practice in the woods. What you bring in, you take out with you, right? Leaving no evidence that you were there, leaving no proof of anything. Now, but what would happen if you went to, say, for an example, oh, just a sec here. There we go. Realized they had two screens going. Not sure how that happened, but okay. But let's say, for example, you go to a park or you go to a wooded area and you see a sign, oh, by the way, no entry between such and such a time and such a time. Well, then it becomes illegal, right? But yet you see people going into these trails, these parks after dark, either jogging or, say, for an example, returning home because the trails go, wherever and you know your way around. So you got your flashlight on your cell phone or wherever, and you're able to walk the trails. So you take your ritual items that you will need for that specific ritual or ceremony. You go in and you do your thing, but you take out what you bring back, what you take in, right? Therefore, there'd be no evidence to any crime. It would be considered illegal trespassing at that point. Cemeteries nationwide have cameras or fences around the perimeter to keep people out, gate systems. To pass through one of these would be classified as trespassing. It would, and if you did any damage, like say at a cemetery or a state park, then it would become destruction of property, right? Theft or violations. Now, what's interesting is that occultism and practices have been associated with grave robbing. It has been classified and associated with vandalism, defamation of, or what's that term I'm trying to think of right now? Defacing a corpse or defiling a corpse. Okay, which has been associated with black magic and sorcery for the last 500 years, even to 1,000 years, going all the way back to nigromancy practices. But yet, here's the kicker. If you are doing research into the legal laws today, I found out that if you are a medical professional, like, say, a doctor, maybe even a morgue technician, you get away with murder because you're basically a scientist studying the effects of a corpse, the dying aspect. You know, the art of dying is actually a Tibetan term for the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And it basically deals with what happens during the dying stage, what happens after that, the circle of life, so to speak. It becomes part of spirituality. But here's the thing, you're legally able to do this stuff if you have a license to do so. But yet, you'll find that most of these individuals are white light practitioners. I'm talking Wiccans, pagans. If thy harm none, do as thy will. The witches Radi, going back to 1974 with Gerald Gardner. People forget that even Christianity utilized corpses. I mean, let's face it, we're talking about the blood of Christ. We're talking about the body of Christ, right? They worship a dead man, and they do it legally. But yet, a necromancer can't, or a Satanist can't worship their way. Even a voodoo practitioner, Santa Morte practitioner, Palo a Palero, within Palo Mayambi, Santeria, Quimbanda, they can't do this stuff too? Hmm. Sounds to me like the system is broken. But yet, while I was going down through, most of what I just named off, especially here in the United States, is and falls underneath what is known as a Class C and D crime. Okay? Hey, Seeking Serpent. Class C and D crimes fall into this: trespassing, illegal trespassing, which is basically the equivalent of DUI, drinking and driving, you know, um, things that befall destruction of property, vandalism, stuff like that, and allows the judge to set probation. And what's ironic is this sets up to about 364 days in jail. And it also implies a $2,000 fine. Okay. But it all surrounds your personal history. How many times have you had a run in with the legal system? You see, this allows the judge or the jury to set the maximum or the most limiting sentence possible. You may end up, if it's your first time, with probation. Second time, with, say, a heavy duty fine, like, say, $625. Okay. But up to 2 grand. Okay. Now, a Class D crime, on the other hand, which is associated with, say, defiling a corpse, grave robbing, destruction of private property. Okay. This doesn't really have a sentence outside of being the low end of the totem pole when it comes to felonies. Okay. You see, the fine is up to about 5 grand. That's $5,000. But here's the kicker: it also opens you up for a legal lawsuit, a civil lawsuit. Okay. meaning that the owner of that cemetery or that owner of that park can turn around and sue you in a civil suit. But just like any court system, there has to be evidence, a clear, established motive, an interior motive, a chain of evidence speaking that you know what you were doing, okay? When you did it, and that befalls both of these two classifications, by the way, C and D, which is why keeping silent is so important because you want to go about your business without being seen, without being detected. Now, on YouTube, you can look up Palo Mayumbi and other religious foundations, and you see where a priest and a shaman will go, especially when you look up the term black magic. You'll either come up with the female girls band or you'll come up against videos discussing black magic in Mexico. Okay. One video was a shaman, a priest, and a historian, so to speak, went out into the desert talking about how the church shuns any dealings with witchcraft, but yet they are stocking their hex fighting kits. Isn't that duality? Hypocrisy? Well, let's go even further. They went out into an area of where black magic was rumored to be done. And supposedly they found over 100 jars and items that were based off curses and hexes, vile and baneful magics. Now, number one in black magic, the key is not to leave anything behind. Discretion is 9/10 of the law. But in another video, a secret organization or public organization that deals with, well, let's just say things like private security or groups like that would go out and they would find, things like Palo Mayumbi type rituals that have been taking place. Now, doesn't this sound so familiar? I mean, going back to the late 1980s, early 90s, people supposedly having being hypnotized and going, "Oh my God, I'm a victim of sexual abuse, misconduct by Satanists," type rituals, and yet no ritual was ever discovered. But yet these groups would go out and they would come upon a fresh area where a cauldron, a naganga, as it's called, was found with machetes, human skulls, coins, ash, and a bunch of other things like antlers and woods and twigs, all shoved down inside. No other evidence was found, and yet they. Wow. And yet Christians can go out and do revivals in tents in the middle of a field, and nobody confronts them. Ironic. Did we forget about history? Did we forget about what things used to be like? What people used to do? And how witches, warlocks, mages, and sages were all considered to be wise men and women of the cloth, some form of clergy? Where did it become divided? Where did it become a crime to practice a religious rite? Think about that for just a minute. Look at where you live. We know that the First Amendment recognizes what a protected religion is. It's made up of three things: Just like the Holy Trinity, right? God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, blah, blah, blah. Or what about the unholy Trinity? Lucifer, Beelzebub, Astaroth. Yep, three things. Okay? A foundation, meaning a church, order, or some form of establishment. Doctrine, like a Bible, a grimoire. And a following, meaning you. You see, these are the three things that make up a protected religion. Now, if you go underneath religious land use and personalized religious acts, you'll notice that it states a lot of mumbo jumbo, which you only have to scroll down to equal terms. And you see A, B, C, and D. Okay? Most simplified version of it states that no individual, sect, assembly, or foundation has the right to limit or deny your freedom of religion. Okay? And what you practice. And what's ironic, hey, Areta, didn't see you jump in there. You snuck in there without me knowing. Awesome job. So, anyways, let's look at this for just a minute. We know that the medical community has been studying cadavers, which is basically corpses. We know that there are numerous laws throughout this country alone that protects corpses. But yet you can melt the skin and all the bacteria off and make medical cadavers. You can send dead corpses to the university so that students can have physical access to cut you open as many times as they see fit. But yet it's legal because they have a paper that says so. Think about that for just a minute. Religion versus the legal system. Isn't it ironic that everything goes back to the JCI? Even with today's issues surrounding COVID-19. I have a lot of friends within the medical field who work within funeral homes to embalmers. Hell, I have a lot of friends who work in fast food that deals with hundreds of people. I'm talking 900 people in a run of a day, handling your financials, your cash, coming snout to snout with you. And yet, the legal law states that you have to have a mask. Well, Satanists have been wearing masks for a long time. Ritual robes have been used from everything from the right hand path to the left hand path practices. Conditioning has always been part, especially with that of the psyche and the mind, has always been associated with JCI. Not just North Korea or North Vietnam, North Vietnam aspect of keeping your face covered. Look at Islam. It is mandatory for you to have your face covered if you are single or if you are a woman. In Korea, they literally have announcement speakers going off 24/7. Remember to keep your distance, social distancing. Make sure to wear gloves, wash your hands. Afraid of catching the common cold. Everything's generic. There's no authenticity behind any of the ingredients, such as herbalism, associated with left hand path, dealing with poisons or herbs that will heal you. But yet here we are. We now have legal laws stating that it is mandatory for you to wear these things before going into a establishment. And it is up to each establishment to literally enforce it. Enforce it. Otherwise, they lose their business license. Welcome to the Third Reich. Just saying. But yet, here's the other aspect. The law that was passed about a month ago, within the last month and a half, here in the state of Maine, states that it is mandatory for you to be wearing gloves, a mask, stuff like that, and keeping social distancing, unless you have COPD, which is a chronic breathing problem. Like, say, you're on dialysis or you have asthma. Now, corporations cannot enforce this at this point because all you have to say is, oh, I have COPD. Well, guess what? Customers take offense to this when you say, well, I can't wear anything over my nose because I have asthma. You incite the law, well, they get butthurt over it. But yet they're the first ones to come into your place of business and say, what, I can't come in with my t-shirt over my face? Or, oh, I have COPD. Well, we can't argue with them. So we have to accept it. It's that duality process. It's the same thing with the legal system in religions. The Ramsey Law, the DOJ, the American Civil Liberties Union, which is supposed to be upholding your religious rights, they're not. You got things like the TST who are going out and literally a very laughable duality, stating, oh, guess what? We're proud to announce abortions have now been made legal. Abortions. Unless you're not a member of our organization. Boom. Well, there goes that hope. Oh well. Sorry to burst your bubble, ladies and gentlemen. It would be the same thing with the COS. Welcome to atheism at its best. But hey, at least you know your legal rights, right? Knowing your rights and surrounding your practices will help prevent you from being arrested. Most importantly, these laws are there to protect you. Now, I find it personally, outstandingly, um, I don't know how to accept this one because it was something that was pointed out to me that I actually did look up. With all the laws against defamation of corpses or violation of corpses or defaming corpses in graveyards and all that stuff, did you know that cannibalism is legal in the United States? That's hilarious. Oh, you can't defile a corpse, but yet you can eat one. You see the duality. You see the hypocrisy. Okay? Now look at where you are worldwide. Look at where you are worldwide. In European countries, if you're into religious propaganda and you end up, say for an example, let's say for an example, you try to discredit somebody, that's a form of defamation of character. Okay? But get this. This is actually kind of funny. If you're in England, France, all the way down into Spain, which is classified as European countries, even all the way over to Russia. If you commit defamation of character, number one, you're going to be fined heavily, up to, I believe it's about 10 grand. Second of all, imprisonment for up to 5 years. 3 to 5 years. Oh, yes. Look it up for yourself. That's something I recently learned over the last month. And it is downright amusing. Okay? But it doesn't stop there. Look at your government. What do they recognize religion as? Now drop it down into your legal rights, your legal laws, from federal laws to local laws to corporations. Okay? You see, here in the US, we have what is known as the Ramsey Law. Okay? The Ramsey Law will literally protect the company. Okay? Basically, they can have you dress up as a private school type uniform. Okay? Some companies, depending on how dangerous it can be, let's say, for an example, you're working around a conveyor belt. Obviously, you don't want a necklace hanging out. Okay? So they're protecting your life at that point, which means you can't wear religious affiliations. But if you're working in, say, fast food or, say, a banking system, it's upheld. You're able to do this. So I would recommend looking at your government, your company. Go to your human resources and say, "Hey, what is your dress code rules of conduct? Okay, what do you recognize as a dress code?" Okay, and then ask them, "What do you look at as being a violation of that dress code?" Tell them what's going on. Okay, if it's based off your religion, which is what happened to me once, just a few years ago. The first time ever, I had an ASM, an assistant store manager, right out in front of everybody, told me to remove my Orcrux, remove my rings, or I would lose my job, my livelihood. Okay, so I went to the human resources department, and I inquired on these two subjects. She said, "Well, why are you asking?" So I said, "This is what came to me." Okay. Apparently, a customer took offense to my Orcrux. Now, obviously, you've seen a lot more on my fingers. Okay. Not just that, but some other stuff. Okay. Now, she asked me to send her photos. So I did. She said, "There is nothing there that violates company rules." Therefore, effectively eliminating the Ramsey Law in general. Okay. Therefore, it comes down to the United States constitutional rights of freedom of religion, which means you can go to the American Civil Liberties Union or the Department of Justice and file an official complaint. Okay? But I would also recommend that you look at your state, district, and borough because each one of these can make up their own regulations on what is considered to be a protected religion. Okay? So you can really delve into this stuff. Well, if you're at a college, go to your dean, call your human resources and say, "Hey, this is what my profession is. What do you view as a violation of dress code?" Okay, when it comes to religious propaganda. Okay, same exact thing. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. A lot of places require you to be discreet. Okay, world when you go to say, for an example, into European countries, obviously going into, say, Vatican City would be like hanging yourself by a noose. Okay, because that's heavily Catholic, Roman Catholic to be precise, and they would put to death by stoning anybody. That's the same exact thing as going into the Middle East and saying, "Hey, I'm a Satanist," or "I'm a necromancer." Guess what? You're going to be stoned to death, just like Saddam Hussein. Oops. But hey, things are changing now, right? Laws are being taken into effect. More and more rights are being recognized, especially in the Middle East, even in India. So that's always a good thing. But those who are associated with death have always been shunned. Black magic, welcome to being a dark sorcerer or sorceress, where you are shunned for what you do and who you are. This is why we remain in the shadows. This is why we are smarter than the average Joe, because we do our homework, because we know what our craft and what we do. Keep that in mind. This is why we stay silent. Have a good night.